Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Transfer Portal Podcast presented by NoContextCFB. This is the end of bowl season. We got one more game, national championship. We're going to talk about the bowls that we've seen in the last few days. Yes, Georgia is in the national championship as Brian is repping them. Alongside me today, I will be talking. My name is Andrew Wilson. Alongside me, other Andrew and Brian. Let's just get straight into the first thing that we kind of need to talk about. The transfer portal is going Hollywood. We got our first reps to go to a bowl game. Brian and Andrew, what was your experience like in New Orleans?
Well, in New Orleans was fine. It was getting there that was absolute hell. And I think Brian could attest this better than I can. He had to drive to San Antonio to pick me up in Houston. Rain followed him the entire way. It was fucking unbelievable. And literally that entire week, it did not rain at all. And all of a sudden, the day that we had to make that drive to New Orleans, day of the game, we go to the New Orleans Bowl. It is pouring from Houston, from where I was, even he says San Antonio from where he was, following us all the way to freaking New Orleans. And there were accidents. We actually almost got hit by a car actually while I was driving. We were crossing the Louisiana border, or it might have just been right before. But there was a car that was in front of us that was just absolutely hydroplaning right across the highway. If we were 2 seconds ahead, we probably wouldn't even be here right now. But in terms of getting to New Orleans, which we showed up late for, we tried to get there 2 hours early. Nah, because of everything that happened, we got there 45 minutes late.
Oh,
Uh, getting the credential was a hassle because first we were told to go to the media garage, which we did. Lady told us to go to the Superdome ticket office. We go there. They told us to go to the floor on the bottom, and then we get there, and they're like, "No, you got to go back to the media garage." And I'm just like, "What the fuck are we doing here?" But no, we finally got it. We got into the stadium, and Superdome is really nice. It's pretty nice. I think it's pretty nice for as old as a 40-plus-year-old stadium can be. Um, little disappointed with the press box amenities. I mean, guys, New Orleans Bowl, Superdome, y'all can do better than chips and soda. Okay, I'm sorry. But we saw a pretty good game with Marshall and Louisiana. Marshall took good control for the first 3 quarters. Shout out Levi Lewis. Led the Raging Cajuns back. Lafayette gets Louisiana. Sorry to offend all the Raging Cajuns out there with Lafayette. They get their bowl win, their first win post Napier era. It was a lot of fun, really fun. We were on the field. We got to see a touchdown score literally right in front of us. We were behind Louisiana's bench. We got to be on the field for the trophy ceremony. It was honestly spectacular. And I'm sure Brian's got a couple stories to tell about what else happened. But I'm going to the Texas Bowl tomorrow too, and I'm really excited to go to NRG's press box. Being in the city that I've lived in for the last 15 years, I'm excited. This is big for not just myself. This is just big for the transfer portal in general because we're taking steps, we're taking leaps. If you asked us like if we were going to get credentials by the beginning of the season, I would have thought you were on crack.
yeah. No, yeah. Everything Andrew said was right. It was pretty fun. It was a lot of fun. It was very empowering. Honestly, just the fact that we can walk into the field and nobody told us anything, nobody stopped us. It felt weird, and also like kind of felt like I felt a little bit like powerful. If for lack of a better word, I just it just that I don't know. It's hard to explain the feeling that I had walking down there and just being able to walk in through security without being told to stop, without nobody telling me anything, and being behind the benches and right in front of the end zone and seeing that score. I've always wondered. I was trying to find the broadcast where the game. I was trying to find the full broadcast where the game ends and then you see everybody running onto the field. I wanted to see if I could find that and see if we could see us running onto the field after the game was over. But I can't. All I found are highlights, and then they stop it as soon as the last play ends. They stop the highlight video. So I haven't been able to find it, but if it's out there and you see it, let us know, because I would like to see that. But no, it was a lot of fun for me. So I work overnight at a hotel. As part-time, I work night audit, which is basically the night shift. I work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And literally that we left was at Saturday. So it's Friday night I worked. So I worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Friday night to 7 a.m. Saturday morning. I literally went home, changed, took a shower, got ready, packed my little bag, and then immediately hit the road. And I felt like trash. Like I literally had, I had to stop like 4 times to go to the bathroom. So, and it was raining, but literally as soon as I left my house, it started raining. It wasn't raining when I got home, on my way home from work. It wasn't raining, and the moment I got in my car to drive to New Orleans or to Houston to pick up Andrew. It started raining. So I'm on no sleep. I literally went maybe 36 hours without sleep. It was raining the whole time. I almost died. I got a speeding ticket, and I just found out. My wife literally just came into the room and told me that I got, which is ridiculous. So yeah, it turned out to be a very expensive, very grueling trip. But it's definitely something that, looking back, depending on, especially this becomes something bigger, like we all want it to be. It'll definitely be an experience and a story to have, and something that kind of go from show our growing pains and how it turned out to be. And yeah, so it's incredible. And I'm so happy for Andrew that's going to do that tomorrow. There's kind of that you do it once, it's kind of lucky. You do it twice, it's a trend. So you get one credential, it's kind of, you get lucky, maybe they don't have a lot of people apply, whatever, they let you know. When you get two, then now it's kind of a habit. Now it's a trend. So now that we're established, a lot of people can get it once, not a minute, and then it kind of diminishes from that. So the fact that we can, not only did we get it once, we got it twice. It's pretty special, I think. I'm sad that I'm not going to be able to be there. It would have been amazing to go, but I'm so happy for Andrew. I hope that you have a great time there. And it's only the beginning. Hopefully next year we get more and more and more and more. And, next thing we know, we're getting credential media for the college football playoff, or for the national championship game, or for, all of these other events that are high importance. That would be definitely special. But it was a good time. With all the trials and tribulations that we faced, it was a great time. But yeah, the food, I was expecting a plate of a shrimp or crawfish. I know it's not crawfish season quite yet, but I was really expecting something, maybe some gumbo or some jambalaya or some boiled shrimp or something. But no, they had peanuts, and what else they had? Pretzels and sodas and a bag of chips. That's all they had. So yeah, it was definitely an experience, but something that I'll never forget. It was an amazing experience for all that happened. I don't regret anything that happened. I wouldn't have it any other way. It was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it very much. So I can't wait. Sure.
So, it's kind of funny, I remember, because since we got there late, we didn't have access to the field pre-game, but once it got close to the end of the game, like with like 5 minutes left to go, and we took the media elevator down to the field level, we kind of looked at each other and we were kind of just like, we noticed the security guards there. We noticed the security guards there, and we're looking at each other. We're just like, "No, you go. No, you go." We're kind of like battling each other, being like, "Hey, I want you to get stopped first, not me." And then we kind of just said,
we stood there for like 30 seconds, like we
just said, "Fuck it, let's just walk in." Okay, and then like the security guards that were there, they looked at us and they're just like, "Okay," like they just looked at us and just like, these are just supposed to pass through, like okay, I guess we were acting like bozos for no reason, you know what I mean? And that was honestly the crazy part, and Brian, you need to take defensive driving, man.
I don't know. I don't think I'm going to pay a ticket. I'm probably not going to pay the ticket. They want to arrest me. When am I ever going back to New Orleans? Probably not anytime soon. If they want to arrest me, they can. I'll be fine. But yeah, that was ridiculous.
You ain't
So
the only one that lost money. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I didn't lose $200 when I was at a New Orleans casino on the way out, but that's a different story.
yeah, no, yeah, it was definitely an experience to do, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, enough about us. Let's talk about our what's going on, especially today. So, when we were kind of planning our podcast today, we weren't going to talk about this. It wasn't news, and then right before we kind of about an hour or so this dropped, we Caleb Williams is in the transfer portal. I kind of talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and it was me, Andrew, and Liam. We were talking about kind of what transfers do you see coming, and I not to brag or anything. I'm not trying to do that, but I kind of mentioned what about Caleb Williams? Going to kind of transferring now that Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma. It was more of a fun hypothetical, but it's here that actually happened, which is Caleb Williams is going to leave Oklahoma. So, what do y'all think about that? Because it was kind of shocking to me. It wasn't shocking. It was surprising, but it wasn't shocking, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that since the Lincoln Riley departure, this felt a little bit more likely. I still didn't expect it. I thought that Caleb Williams would view this as, okay, I don't have Rattler behind me anymore, or whatever they thought they were going to do this offseason. And now I get the chance to be the number one QB for sure at Oklahoma. And now it's, oh, well, now he feels that for whatever reasons he wants to leave the program. He feels he's making the best decision for his career. So good on him for, doing that instead of just doing the, I guess, quote unquote, safe thing, which would be staying at a program that you're pretty much going to be the starter at. But I think something we're kind of glancing over that I feel like we actually kind of forgot to talk about, Dylan Gabriel just flipped to Oklahoma. So not only is Oklahoma losing Caleb Williams, but they're actually gaining Dylan Gabriel, who's a very talented quarterback. And Caleb Williams, in his whole "I'm transferring" statement, he said OU isn't out of the picture. Well, now they kind of are. So now you got to look at other programs that need a quarterback. I've heard Ole Miss. I saw someone say, I think someone said something about a Florida State. I don't know, but this is going to be super interesting because the transfer portal is kind of turning college football into a free agency frenzy, and I'm all for it. Yeah.
In terms of where Caleb's going to go, it's really tough because here's the thing. Let's just go ahead and let's just state something that's obvious here. Brent Venables, as much as successful as he was at Clemson, he obviously does not have the same pull that Lincoln Riley did. I mean, let's just be honest. Lincoln Riley goes to USC, and all of a sudden USC is just – they're absolutely killing 2023 recruiting class right off the bat. So good on Lincoln at this point. Brent Venables, on the other hand, I'm not saying that he doesn't look like the type of guy that you wouldn't want to play for, but Lincoln Riley has energy. He has youth. He brings excitement to a program. And unfortunately, whenever I look at Brent Venables, and he's a defensive first guy at a university that hasn't done that well in terms of defense in the last couple of years, to say the least. What are we supposed to be doing here that's impressive at Oklahoma? And I'm not saying that Brent Venables is not the guy. That's not it. But let's be honest, when you go to Oklahoma and you're an offensive guy, you're a wide receiver, running back, quarterback, you go to Oklahoma to run an offense. And unfortunately, I just don't think that's what Caleb Williams sees right now. In terms of where I think he'll go, I think Ole Miss makes a lot of sense. He's, I'm trying to think, he's from the DC area. Is there any place close by that would take him? Maybe UVA. I highly doubt it. I think he does want to go out and win now. If I had to make a prediction right now, I'd probably say UCLA. Dylan Gabriel's ex-commitment. I just think it makes sense for Caleb to go to UCLA, and him and Dylan essentially make a trade right there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't click that now that Dylan Gabriel went back, is flipping over to Oklahoma. UCLA has an opening, and yeah, you talked about Ole Miss because we just saw also earlier John Rhys Plumlee is transferring from Ole Miss. And can we talk super sidetrack? Can we stop with the super long transfer announcements or draft announcements? I don't care.
5 tweets.
You know, I don't care. Yeah, like nobody cares who you have to thank. Nobody cares who helped you. Like, we get it. All right, everybody has that. Okay, everybody thanks God. Everybody thanks their cook. Like, we get it. Okay, just tell us what you're doing. I don't need it at the very. Just put it at the very top. I'm transferring from Ole Miss, and then you can say your thank yous. I don't want to have to read through 5 tweets. Come, like, that's ridiculous. First of all, John Rhys Plumlee isn't Caleb Williams. He doesn't have that kind of pull to put out a 5-tweet essay saying he's going to transfer. But anyway, so I digress on that. But yeah, that's really interesting. I think, yeah, I don't know. There really isn't much. Maybe I still kind of like the idea of him going to Clemson. I don't know what they want to do with DJ Ungalalele. I mean, he did okay this year. He wasn't the best he could be, I don't think. Do they want to trust him with another season? Or maybe they want to make that move. I don't know who else might. Maybe I think there might be a dark horse out there. Maybe in the SEC, maybe a team like Georgia. I don't know what Georgia's quarterback situation. They have like 4 guys. Stetson Bennett's going to be gone next year. And then you have JT Daniels, who's always hurt, and then you have 2 unproven guys behind them. Is that something you want to kind of consider? And Kirby Smart's done that before when he got Jamie Newman and JT Daniels in the same off seasons. So I don't know if that's something that he would want to try to do, but I don't think that's very likely, but it's not out of the question. I don't know, but we'll see. We'll definitely see what happens. Now in college football, the recruiting and transfer portal and all that have become such a big deal nowadays, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it in these recruiting classes and in the transfer portal. So it's very interesting for sure.
I mean, one university that has been in the mix for Caleb Williams in terms of talking would be Texas A&M, to which I wholeheartedly disagree with. I think I already said that if Quinn Ewers would have gone to A&M when he essentially left Ohio State, that if he went to A&M, he would just be another Tay Martell. I think it'd be the same situation with Caleb Williams. And this is why. A&M are already bringing in Max Johnson from LSU transferring. They're getting Haynes King back, who was a All-American during his last year of high school. He was a redshirt freshman this year. He was injured most of the season. He already knows A&M's offense about as well as any other quarterback in the A&M room. And also A&M is bringing in the National High School Player of the Year in Connor Weigman. Well, he was National Quarterback of the Year in Connor Weigman, and he is getting all the hype in College Station right now. And alumni are hyping him up. The university is backing him completely. So for Caleb Williams to go into A&M, I just don't know what gets sold at that point. In terms of Clemson, it's a bit of a similar situation. I am still a believer in DJ Uiagalelei. I just think it was a really bad year for Clemson in general. It wasn't just the quarterback position. It was just the offense was just so chippy choppy every week in, week out. I blame a lot of it on the offensive play calling. Also, they're getting another one of the top quarterbacks in the country in Cade Klubnik, who just won a state title with Westlake High School in Austin. He's going to Clemson. So whenever you look at some of the top quarterbacks in the country that are going to where they're going, I'm sorry, Caleb, you're essentially just another 5-star high school guy, because let's say you go somewhere for fall camp, guess what? That's another offense you got to learn. You essentially have to get there in the summer to even get started, because I'd assume it'd probably be too late to go in for spring ball. Unfortunately, as much as we love the transfer portal, it takes a year to get really settled in. And we saw that with the likes of Jalen Hurts when he went to Oklahoma, even Kyler Murray when he went to Oklahoma. It's not as much of a glamorous move in the beginning as we would like for it to be. This is more of a move that you would see more for 2023 rather than 2022.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add just like one more little place that I've heard for Caleb Williams, which would honestly kind of make me laugh. Not for Caleb Williams' sake, just for the head coach's sake. I've heard Nebraska, and Caleb Williams and Scott Frost just doesn't sound like a match. It really doesn't. I mean, Scott Frost just doesn't sound like a match with anyone right now. But yeah, I agree with Andrew. This is going to be kind of a thing where he can't really go to like a top program right now and expect to be the starter. Like how Andrew was talking about A&M. We don't know. Like, would Caleb be the for sure starter over Haynes King since we haven't seen a ton from him? It's definitely tough to think, but he's a very talented guy. I think he will end up finding a good place. And I do also want to add on Brian's point. I do agree with the whole like 5 paragraph tweet. I will say the ones who do it right are the ones who highlight the stuff like, oh, at the bottom, I'm declaring for the draft, or I'm entering the transfer portal, or this is what I'm thinking. Then you have all the minor details in the non-bold text. But I do think when you decide that your time at a university is up, whether it's time to go to the NFL or a different university, you should have a little statement just to kind of clear the air, make sure there's no like bad blood. But yeah, like 5 tweets, it's a little much.
To be fair, he did thank Ole Miss baseball in one of them. But nobody gives a rat's ass about your baseball career.
Not even the best baseball program in their state.
So
Yeah,
speaking
no,
of A&M, we did. Oh, Brian, did you want to add something real quick?
no. Go ahead.
So speaking of A&M, I kind of wish we had Lauren on for this one, but shout out A&M for those that
Oh, we're good.
watched the Under Armour All American game. A&M officially has, as of right now, we obviously still have All American Bowl this weekend. We still have the actual National Signing Day that comes in March, I believe. But A&M right now, as it stands, has the number one recruiting class in the history of college football for as long as rankings have been a thing. I got a couple coworkers at work that are A&M alumni, and one of them did bring up a good point. With A&M being the number one recruiting class of all time, or just number one in general, before they even got Harold Perkins from Cyprus. He came from one of the Cyprus schools. How much pressure does this put on Jimbo Fisher at this point? Because people have been knocking on Jimbo Fisher ever since he took the A&M job of that he's not been the big one yet. I mean, he got the win over Alabama this year, and look where it got him. It got him to an 8-4 regular season. COVID issues essentially knocked him out of the Gator Bowl. Jimbo, it's officially time now. You got the greatest class of all time. Just to name some of the names that are just on here, you've got Walter Nolan, number one defensive lineman in the country, number two player in the country overall. We got Evan Stewart, arguably the best wide receiver in the country. You got Gabriel Brownlow Dindy. He's top 4 and among defensive linemen. He's number 60 in the country. Denver Harris, that is one of the biggest ones because Denver Harris was originally supposed to go to either Alabama or Texas. He goes to A&M, 5-star defensive back, top 5 player in the state, goes to A&M. Connor Weigman, I already mentioned him. I've seen this dude play twice this year. He is a spectacular quarterback. I saw him score 7 touchdowns and 1 half. He is phenomenal. And just some of these other guys like PJ Williams, Chris Marshall, Bryce Anderson, and A&M has completely dominated the state of Texas in ways that, look, Texas is picking up the slack a little bit, but right now Texas A&M, they own the state of Texas in terms of the recruiting landscape. So shout out to Jimbo because he clearly knows the state well enough at this point. He knows the areas. He has dominated the Houston area, most importantly, which is spectacular. I got to give my props to Jimbo. But Jimbo, once 2024 comes around and a lot of these players start becoming redshirt sophomores or true juniors, it's playoff time or bust. And at this point, I think we're going to want just a little bit more than playoff. Let's just be honest, we want the promised land. Aggie Land is going to want the national title game. They're going to want to win that national title game. They want to be on the same level as your Clemson's, Alabama, Ohio State. This is do or die time. This is do or die time for A&M at this point.
I completely agree. Congrats to Jimbo and the A&M recruiting staff for getting this amazing class. This is the first step. Now you got to use these next few years to develop these talents into national championship caliber players. They're not there yet, even though you see the stars. You see a lot of 5 stars, a lot of 4 stars. You see these stars. That doesn't equate to talent at the college level yet, because we've seen 5 stars and 4 stars. I don't like the term bust, but not turn out to what we thought they may be. Now you got to use these next few years, get them on whatever training program you need, get them the reps that they need in practice, just get them to the level that they need to be to help this team contend for a national championship, because that is what A&M has been looking for so long. This is only the first step. They need to use this first step as kind of a little bit of a ladder. You got that first rung, now you got to go up the next one. Go up the next one. We're not expecting you to win the national championship next year, because that's pretty unrealistic. But like Andrew said, 2023, 24, 25, those are the years you need to be not only looking at the college football playoff, because hopefully by then we have an expansion. You need to be looking at national title. Like that's really the thing right now. It's national title or bust. Like, if you asked an A&M fan, do they want to go to a national championship game? I would expect their answer to be, well, yeah, but we want to win it, as would everyone. But an appearance is not enough. You need to bring home the trophy as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing that also is a big deal with this class is as you're getting it before Texas joins the SEC and starts competing for these SEC caliber players. You have that leg up. So even if, whenever Texas joins the SEC, whether it's 24 or and Oklahoma too, for that matter, if it's 24, 25, or 23, you have this class already installed by the time they do join. So even if they do start coming in and start, picking players off, whether it's, in recruiting or in the transfer portal, you have this class already established in there where it might, kind of catapult you to that next step over Texas. Because let's be honest, once Texas joins the SEC, it's going to be a bloodbath in recruiting in the state of Texas. It's going to be insane, because A&M, using that, we saw when they went from the Big 12 to the SEC, they got better as a program. They started winning more games, started being more relevant, and you have to give the SEC, brand credit for that. Once Texas comes in, Texas A&M already has this historic class. They're going to be able to win more games early on, and then they're going to use that to their advantage as well to kind of keep building on it. One historic class, and then going back to in the mid, in the bottom 10 or in the mid teens, that's not going to be enough. You can't just have one historic class and then, stop there. You have to continue building on that. I'm not saying they're going to be historic every year, but you're going to do kind of what Nick Saban's been able to do and get a top 4 class every year, what Kirby Smart's able to do, what Dabo Swinney's able to do, and get these top 2 or 3, 4 classes every single year. So I think that's a great, having this class now before you kind of get that competition from Texas and from Oklahoma, it kind of allows you to keep building on that. You already have the foundation, you have that base, and you can continue building and building and building and building and building and getting to the college football playoff every year. And then, you have that establishment, and you have that pull and that resume for these recruits moving forward. And you can build on that. So I think it's very important for Jimbo Fisher. And let's give Jimbo Fisher's credit. He's a championship winning coach. He's won a national championship. He's not, Lincoln. I don't want to not say Lincoln Riley, but Lincoln Riley has never won a national championship. A lot of these guys have never won national championships. And we see the Texas, the coaching carousel that's been going on at Texas and stuff like that. And, who knows how long Nick Saban has to go. So this is a prime opportunity for Jimbo Fisher to establish himself as one of the premier coaches in college football and be one of the premier programs in college football moving forward. So I think we're going to see kind of between Dabo Swinney, Kirby Smart, Jimbo Fisher, at least in the South, you'll have your West Coast with USC, UCLA, and all that. You'll always have that, but in the South, in in the heart of college football, you'll have, Jimbo Fisher, Kirby Smart, Dabo Sweeney, these types of coaches just competing mightily. And I think it's going to be great. I'm very excited for Texas A&M. I am happy for Texas A&M, and it's going to be great. So shout out to them for sure.
Is it time to talk playoff time now?
Let's go.
Yeah, speaking of college football playoff, for sure. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Brian, let's go ahead and get your pride speech out the way.
Well, so I don't want to be. I'll be honest. I was very excited. I'm very excited watching that game. It was incredible. I don't want to say that I didn't expect it. Just the writing was on the wall. I didn't really think Michigan was going to be able to compete with us. But I did not expect that. I mean, Georgia looked damn good, man. They dominated all from the moment the ball was snapped. They took the ball, the opening possession. They took it all the way down their throat and scored a touchdown. I think it was again like 4 or 5 plays. It was 17-0. Before, with like 8 minutes to go in the first quarter or something like that. So it was just not, and honestly, if it wasn't for Kirby Smart kind of laying off the gas, at the end of the second quarter and in the second half, they would have scored a lot more. So it was really, I want to say this now because this is probably going to be come back and bite me in the ass after the championship game. But when you compare both playoff games within Bama and Cincy and Georgia and Michigan, Georgia looks the better of the two teams. Alabama, they didn't look, they won by 21 points, but for a long time, they didn't look like they didn't look like world beaters against Cincinnati. And, I want to give Cincinnati all the credit in the world, but Cincinnati is not Michigan. So what Alabama was able to do, they struggled to score. I mean, they had 17 points until maybe about halfway through the third quarter. And there was they only gave up 6 points, but there was a lot of times where Cincinnati drove the ball down all the way into the red zone. And I think it was the opening possession where they had a wide open receiver in the end zone that Desmond Ritter's pass was tipped at the goal at the line of scrimmage. That would have been an easy touchdown. So I don't think Alabama looked. I know this is going to come back and bite me in the ass after the championship game, especially if Alabama wins. But I don't think that Alabama looked amazing, and I think Georgia, they look so much, very, very much improved after that SEC championship game. And I think after the SEC championship game, the narrative went away from Georgia. The whole season they were talking about how Georgia was one of the best teams, one of the best defenses ever, one of the best teams of all time. I don't want to go that far, but it was in that they kind of had that steam to them, and then they got hit in the mouth against Alabama in the SEC championship game. And they kind of just became all about Alabama at that point, and the wind got the wind came off the sails from Georgia for a little bit, and this was a prime example of Georgia showing how good you are. And I think they came out with the right attitude. They came out and did what they had to do. And they didn't have a close game against Michigan. They hit them in the mouth. They dominated all game. And I think that's a great step forward to the national championship game. So it was too good. I'm going to go a little bit later on. I'm going to give my thoughts on the actual overall structure of the playoff, but I'll save that for later. But it was both games were blowouts, but they were enjoyable. And I'm excited for the national championship game. I'm excited to get that revenge against Alabama. Hopefully we can do it. But why does it always have to be Alabama? Why do we always have to run into Alabama? I feel like every single year in 2012, when it was basically the de facto national championship game, and the SEC, whoever won the SEC that year was going to play Notre Dame in the championship game. And let's be honest, whoever played Notre Dame was going to beat them very handily. In 2018 in the national championship game, in 2019 in the SEC championship game, this year in the SEC championship game, and now we have to face them again. Like, why do we always have to run into Alabama when Georgia's on the verge of winning a national title? They're running to Alabama, and I hate it, and I can't stand it. But you have to beat them at some point. We're 0-7 since 2008 against Alabama, so you have to beat them at some point. So, I mean, why not now? Why not now? Now is best time ever to beat them. So if they can do it, hopefully, let's. But I digress.
I mean, you kind of already answered your own question already with the whole why do you always have to run Alabama? Well, you said it in the last segments because they always put up a top 3 recruiting class.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I really hope Georgia and Alabama, let's just be honest, if we're going throughout the entire 12-13 game season, they've been the 2 best teams in the country. And I don't even know how that's even debatable at this point. Alabama's one loss was in a hostile environment in Kyle Field. You really can't blame them too much for losing that game. But I really hope this doesn't take away the successful seasons that Cincinnati and Michigan have had. As far as I'm concerned, Jim Harbaugh should be thrilled with the season that Michigan's had, even though they looked absolutely horrendous in the Orange Bowl. You made the playoff when ESPN's FPI gave them essentially less than a 1% chance of making it. I think it was like a 0.01% chance of them making it, according to them. They started the season unranked. Jim Harbaugh gets the long-awaited win over Ohio State that he's been wanting ever since he took over the helm in Ann Arbor. Cincinnati became the first ever Group of 5 team to ever make the playoff for good reason, too. They had quality wins. You beat a top 10 Notre Dame team and South Bend. You beat a very good Houston team that only had 1 loss on the season. That was on a 11-game win streak in the AAC title game. Cincinnati, they punched their ticket, and you just run into the Goliath that is Alabama. That should not take away the accomplishments that Cincinnati has accomplished before. Michigan getting handed the way that they were by Georgia shouldn't take away Michigan's accomplishment from what they did. They won the Big Ten. That has been Ohio State's cream of the crop ever since Urban took over in 2012. They didn't win in 2012, but they went undefeated. The whole tattoo scandal, we're not going to go too much into that. Now I know where to go if I want to free tattoo. Rest my case. But in all seriousness, this should not be about if Michigan shouldn't have made the playoff. It shouldn't be about if Cincinnati should have missed the playoff or none of that. And I also pray to God, like, let's say Houston puts up another season like they did in 2015. Let's say Luke Fickell brings back just as good of a team next season. Whatever the situation may be, I pray that we don't run into a situation of, oh, look what happened last time that we let a Group of 5 team in the playoff. They got absolutely demolished. In all honesty, if you paid attention to the first half of that game, I think Cincinnati put up a better fight than Michigan State did when they played Alabama in the 2015 Cotton Bowl. If I don't have that year mistaken, every time Alabama goes into a semifinal, they're gonna demolish unless they play the likes of Ohio State. But besides, 2014 was a one-off, to be honest with you. But this is just what Alabama does. This doesn't symbolize the G5 in a different way. And now this is where I do think it does change a little bit. Since you've got UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, and BYU, let's just be honest, 3 of those teams have been among the best G5 programs for as long as the playoffs been a thing. This was the G5's one opportunity to get into the playoff. The only way that the G5 program was going to get into the playoff is if you have the likes of a Cincinnati, of a Houston, of a UCF, because UCF had an undefeated season. Houston put up that tremendous season in 2015. They could have had an equally good one in 2016. They put up a great season. If they wouldn't have lost to Tech, they could have been in the conversation also. With those programs now going to a Power 5 program, it really is hard to see another Group of 5 team to stand up and finally make themselves stick out like a sore thumb. But congrats to Alabama, congrats to Georgia on making it to the national title game. And honestly, I really hope Michigan and Cincinnati do not look at those losses as downsides. If anything, they should be seen as stepping stones.
I'm going to get into the college football playoff games into a second, but I kind of want to touch on what Andrew just said with the Group of 5 playoff chances over the next few years. I'm not even looking at the likes of the Cincinnati, BYU, that group joining the Big 12. there's one team that besides this last year they weren't that good. Over the last like 10 years, they were a program that were like, okay, this is going to be the G5 team that like wows us. And that was Boise State. I think that Boise State, before they eventually join the Big 12, because I believe that is rumored to be part of the second group, if there is a G5 team to make the playoff, I think it would be them, just because not only do they have the allure of, it's Boise State. They were the G5 program when they beat Oklahoma. They were the team. So if they have like a really good 2022, ranks them highly in 2023, and then they have a legendary undefeated season, definitely possible. But I do kind of agree. After that second group of Big 12, it's going to be really tough to see somebody, move into the college football playoff until we get an expansion, which, like Brian said, we'll talk about later.
But truthfully, but hold on a second. Let's bring up Boise State, for example, then. I am not here to diss the Mountain West. I am not here to do that. But I'm sorry, but the Mountain West, unless you get a Nevada every year like you do with Carson Strong, which is not going to happen, I just don't see as the Mountain West as that competition that you need to solidify yourself as, as a top four best team. I think if Boise State was to not join a conference, you may as well go independent and create your own schedule like Notre Dame does. Because let's be honest, Boise State, they're still going to attract fans when they play away games. They're still a big brand. They could easily attract big name schools. You don't even have to schedule against, perennial New Year's Six teams. If you could at least squeeze a couple bowl-bound teams into your schedule, then you could have a debate. But if you're stuck in the Mountain West, you're not exactly building your resume in that fashion.
I would disagree. I would say that the Mountain West this year, like if we see some of the programs that made a lot of progress, the San Diego States, the Utah States, maybe Nevada, but Nevada lost too much this year to make me think that they're going to be another, really good team next year. But seeing those two main teams I talked about, Utah State and San Diego State, if they keep this progress going, especially Utah State, because I think they're in a great direction. If you can squeeze in some good Pac-12 teams, which right now we're seeing USC, over the next few years, they're going to be really good. I think UCLA is going to end up, finding their way. I think Washington's going to find their way. Oregon's still going to be Oregon. I think that the West Coast definitely has the ability to create a team that can make the college football playoff. Do they have the same chance as, someone who can have the Notre Dame on their schedule like Cincinnati did this year? Probably not. But I would definitely say that it's still potentially possible, especially if we do get some sort of an expansion in the next few years, which I think I speak for all of us, we're kind of hoping for.
So I know we were going to talk about this later, but let's talk about it now. And because we're kind of already there in the term of the discussion about the college football playoff. I saw a lot. So we've talked about it a lot, and I've seen both. There's two giant spectrums of no, the college. We need to get rid of it. We should go back to the BCS, just the number one versus number two. And then I see the other side where we need to expand it. We need more teams. And there's an argument. I think there's a better argument on like Andrew said. There's a better argument for expansion, and this is why it. We're talking about these teams, the Boise States, the Cincinnati's, Houston. I mean, we saw what Utah did this year after they had, the amazing turnaround they had. And quite honestly, if we had a 12-team playoff, Utah would be a very dangerous team. Just the way they finished their season out in dominating fashion. We forget that Oregon was a top 4 ranked team this year at late in the season, and Utah just completely demolished them, and they were this close of beating Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. So, if there was a playoff expansion and they were in, there would be a very dangerous team. And then I saw an argument too, where people talked about, all these semifinal games have been blowouts, so we should just get rid of the playoff because it doesn't matter. They're all blowouts. Yeah, they're blowouts, but because we're having the two best teams play each other in the championship. If you see all these semifinal games that are blowouts, when you look at the championship games that follows those games, they've been some of the best national championship games we've had in a long time. The last they've been seven national championship games under the college football playoff, and I could say maybe maybe 5 of those games have been legitimately all-time great games. We saw that the Clemson Alabama games back to back. Those were amazing football games. Georgia Alabama was an amazing football game. Even though LSU ended up, even though LSU ended up blowing out Clemson for a good 2.5 quarters, that was a really good football game. So I think that and most of the time it's not one versus. I haven't looked at it. I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head, but how many of those playoff games have been 1 versus 2? Even the inaugural college football playoff, it was the number 4 team in Ohio State winning the championship. This year we wouldn't have Alabama Georgia in the national championship game if there wasn't a playoff, because they weren't. Georgia's ranked number 3. We've had in Alabama, the great Alabama Georgia championship game we had in 2018. Alabama was a 4th ranked team. So, and we wouldn't have had that great game if it wasn't for that. So I think the playoff is working. Yes, it is causing a lot of blowouts in the semifinal game, but it's producing the undisputed 2 best teams in the national championship game. And if you expand that to yes, maybe the gap between 1 and 4 is wide, but the gap between 4 and 12 may not be, right? So if we can get a Utah team, be a 12 seed or a 10 seed or whatever, get to a semifinal game against Alabama or against Georgia, and Michigan did or Cincinnati did, that would be better for college football, in my opinion. And then we can have these discussions about these teams like Boise State and Houston and Cincinnati and UTSA, down the road with the season that they had this year in a college football expansion, they might have a path, an avenue to get into the playoff. So I think that we should be able to have an expanded playoff and not look at it so narrow-sightedly when we talk about, oh, well, all these games have been blowouts. Yeah, they've been blowouts, but because it's the 2 best teams in college football ending up meeting each other in the national championship game. It was clear that Georgia and Alabama were the 2 best teams all season long. And Georgia was ranked number 3 in the college football playoff. If we still had the BCS, they wouldn't even be in the national championship game. When I go back to 2012, when I talk about Georgia and Alabama playing each other in the SEC title game and the winner playing Notre Dame in the national championship game, if the playoff system was constructed back then, Georgia and Alabama probably would have met in the national championship game, because they probably would have put Georgia in the playoff. They would have had Alabama play Notre Dame, the 1 versus 4. They would have had Georgia play whoever, 2 versus 3 or whatever, and then it would have been Georgia and Alabama again in the national championship game. So I don't want to kill too much time on this topic or go off into a long tangent, but this is working. The college football playoff is working. We're looking at it we're dissecting it a little bit too much, in my opinion, but it's working. It's producing the 2 best teams in college football playing in the national championship game, and that's what we want. And if you expand it, I think you can even get better games moving forward. The semifinal games will be better because those teams that are gonna get weeded out through the playoff system, and then you're gonna have a great semifinal game. Maybe it's not gonna be 1 versus 4. Maybe it's 1 versus 8 or 1 versus 9 or 2 versus 7 or whatever. Because the gap, in my opinion, the gap between 4 and 12 is not as great as the gap between 1 and 4 are. And that's just what I think. So, I may be wrong on that, but it doesn't hurt to find out. And if we find out and it turns out that it is, then that just makes football better.
So do not make it 12 is my thing. I'm up for 6 or 8 in terms of playoff expansion. In terms of 12, no. That's where we start talking too many games at this point. And we're obviously going to go into a little bit more on this later. But opt-outs have obviously been a huge part of the season. And there's a good reason amount. Okay, if you saw the Peach Bowl, Andrew, I know you paid very much attention to the Peach Bowl. That game was essentially a bloodbath. How many injuries did we see on Pitt suffer in that game?
Too many.
There had to have been at least 7 injured Pitt players in that game. We saw Nick Petty essentially get off the field, and he was in a sling the whole game on the sidelines. This is why players opt out, is because they don't want to risk injury. Okay, if we add more games, what does this mean for opt-outs? We're going to get more opt-outs at this point? Because let's just be honest. If you're looking at a top 12 team or a number 18 or a number 8 team, you may want to play that game. But then at this point, there's going to be a science developed within 2 to 3 years of a player may not be as healthy as they go into the draft. You might see more injuries. You might see more draft stock plummeting. You'll see a more insurance being taken out on draft day. This is my main thing when it comes to playoff expansion. Sure, we want the good games. We want to see, maybe a team like Utah. We want to see, I think Ohio State, if they were in this playoff, they could have done serious damage. They probably could have gotten a revenge on Michigan. But I just look at the consequences that you get. Sure, we'll get great games. They could all be phenomenal games. They could all be overtime games as far as I'm concerned. But then you start looking at health, and I just think that is, at the end of the day, I just don't think players are going to be all for it for that reason. College football is already a grueling enough season as it is. Now you're going into the NFL where you're going to be playing 17 regular season games and then a playoff. And if you make a number 2 seed in an NFL playoff, guess what? You're not getting that first bye anymore. And at the end of the day, a player is just going to be punished to the bone.
Yeah, that's definitely something you have to consider. I will say this, for playoff expansion, I'm 100% against 8 teams. I think it makes absolutely no sense because it doesn't give the top 4 teams an advantage, which I believe they deserve. If not the top 2, 6, I'm more for 6 than 8, and I'm more for 12 than 8 because it does give those top teams the advantage of a bye, like quote unquote bye. And I'm looking at the latest college football playoff rankings right now. If it was a 16 playoff, guess one of the matches we get in the before semifinal? We get the matchup we wanted later in the season. We wanted the best defense in the regular season, which was Georgia, against the best offense, which was Ohio State. Imagine a fully loaded Ohio State team with Smith and Jigba, Wilson, Olave, Henderson, Rucker, Stroud against that Georgia defense. That would be one for the all-time. And then the other one is a matchup that we had earlier in the season, Cincy versus Notre Dame. So we get a matchup of best offense versus best defense and one of the most thrilling games that decided that a group of 5 team would be in the original 14 playoff. So I think that's great. I like 6 teams. With 12 teams, which I do agree, there's a little bit of a problem with scheduling, teams getting a little banged up. First off, Ohio State, Utah would be a matchup because they are 6-11. So imagine that Rose Bowl game as a playoff game. So not only do you get the allure of that matchup again, but you get it in a status where the winner gets to play more and contend for a national championship, which Ohio State could easily win. Not easily, but they would definitely have a chance out of all the teams lower than 4. Baylor, Ole Miss, I think that would, or not Baylor, Ole Miss, it would be Baylor, Michigan State. I preferably wouldn't care for that game. Ole Miss, Oklahoma State, I think that'd be pretty interesting. Oklahoma State's dominant defense against Ole Miss's offense with Matt Corral, Lane Kiffin. That'd be fun to watch. Pitt, Notre Dame, that'd be fun to watch. I loved Pitt's offense this year. But I just don't know if 4 teams really gives us the 4 best teams right now. I mean, did Michigan and Cincinnati deserve to be there? Yes. Were they the 4 best teams? I mean, yes, Michigan did beat Ohio State, but if they played again, I would put my money on Ohio State.
If Michigan played Michigan State again, they probably would win that game.
I think that Michigan, and this was a point I was going to touch on talking about Michigan, Georgia, but we kind of got off on this tangent. I look at Michigan's 3 biggest games this year, which would be Michigan State, Ohio State, and Georgia. Against Michigan State, they lost in the trenches. They got killed by Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker, he should have gone to New York that day to solidify his place in the Heisman ceremony. And then you look at Ohio State, a team that wasn't strong in the trenches. They murdered Ohio State, especially on the run game with Haskins. And then you look at Georgia. The Michigan offensive lineman had the shirt that said run the dang ball, and they ran for less than 100 yards total. Georgia just was the more dominant team, the more physical team. And Michigan, I don't know if they do that same thing against Ohio State again. I think Ohio State would just put so much pressure in the middle and force McNamara to throw. And we saw McNamara, I mean, he was looking like early season McNamara. He just wasn't that good. So does it give us the 4 most deserving teams? Yes. 4 best teams, that's a different question.
Yep, that's exactly right, Andrew. You hit the nail on the head there. it's kind of more of a power ranking at the end of the day. It kind of looks at the resumes where, you know, we start dissecting resumes when it comes to the 14 playoff. Or they've only have one loss. Well, they have two losses. Well, this and this and that. And so let's talk about Georgia. We saw that opening game against Clemson. They did not look that great offensively. They didn't even score an offensive touchdown. So let's just say we take away that the pick six that Chris Smith had against Clemson that gave them that 10-3 lead that ultimately became being the final score. Let's say that doesn't happen, and Clemson somehow they had the ball down in I think they had the ball in field goal range late. Obviously, they needed a touchdown, which they didn't get, but they did march the ball down in relatively field goal range. So let's just say in a 3-3 game, Clemson makes that field goal and wins that football game. Now Georgia does what they do the rest of the season. They completely dominate. Now they're 11-1 going into the SEC championship game and they lose. They're not in the playoff, right? They're not in the playoff. So can you really tell me that they're not one of the four best teams after that season they had? Sure, they lost that opening game against Clemson and they lost the last game against Alabama, but you have those 11 middle games where they completely dominated everybody they saw. And in a 14 playoff, they're not getting in. And we see that time and time again. If Alabama loses that game against Auburn in the last game of the season, which they needed that last second touchdown, they're not in the playoffs right now. They would have been a 2-loss team. But yeah, they probably still would have beat Georgia, but there would have been a 2-loss team. And then you have that question about Notre Dame getting in over them, or somebody of that, the 4, that 5, 6, 7 range getting in over Alabama as a 2-loss team. The margin of error is so small in college football right now, just to get into the playoff. And it was even smaller before the playoff. So you've seen it. And I don't want to compare it to other sports because college football is one of probably the most unique sport there is, just in the game, the product on the field, the way everything works. You get rewarded for how you win. You don't just get rewarded for winning. You get rewarded for how you win. And I think that's important. But if you look at other sports, you look at you look at Major League Baseball, you see how the Atlanta Braves won the World Series. They were the least. They won 88 games all season. They had a losing record in the All-Star break, and they make the playoffs and they win the World Series, right? So if they have a college football type, system if the MLB had that system, they wouldn't have been in the playoffs. They wouldn't have had that ability to win that championship. If we've seen it in the NFL, we saw the Giants win Super Bowls being 9-7 when they beat the 17-0 Patriots. They were 9-7. They were barely squeaking in the playoffs. We see this all the time. So I think college football, the margin of error is so small that you kind of need a little bit of a leeway to give these teams like Utah an ability to be able to be there late. And to Andrew's point about the opt-outs, yeah, it's going to reduce the opt-outs. But, the opt-out is more of it's a newer thing. And I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but the opt-outs are newer phenomenon that happened. It really started with Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey was the first person really to opt out of their bowl game. And I kind of started the waterfall and the avalanche from there. I think he opted out. And then I think Leonard Fournette opted out as well. And that's kind of got the ball rolling with these opt-outs. But, we're having players opting out of their bowl game who really would benefit from a bowl game performance. Just speaking on Georgia's side, I think a couple of years ago, we had our third or fourth string running back opt out of we had Isaiah Holyfield opt out of the bowl game and he went undrafted. We saw, a lot of we were seeing a lot of players opt out when honestly they shouldn't be opting out, in my opinion. I don't want to get too much into that because we'll get to it, but if the playoff will help that, you'll have players play more meaningful football games that will help their draft stock. And sure, injuries will hurt your draft stock, but playing in these games to some players will help their draft stock. And then if you can have a team in if you can have Chris Olave play in a playoff game, and if Chris Olave would have played in the Rose Bowl and had the performance, that, oh my God, I'm like blanking on his
Jackson.
name. Jackson. If he had the performance that he had, if Chris Olave had, he would have cemented his draft stock as probably a top 10, top 15 pick this year with having that all-time performance in the Rose Bowl. So, if you make that a playoff game, you can have that ability to do that. and really cement your draft stock. But I think we definitely need to expand the playoff. 12 teams is my perfect number for me, because I think the gap between, like I said, the gap between 4 and 12 are a lot smaller than the gap between 1 and 4. And once you get to even 8 and 12 are really small. You start nitpicking at that point. So I do think 12 teams is probably the better way to go. And then just have the top four get the first round bye, and then have the other eight play each other, and then you go from there. But yeah, that's my opinion on that.
I'm gonna touch on one thing really quick. With whatever you want to format it, I beg the College Football Playoff Committee, do not have auto conference bids. I do not want to see a bad Pac-12 winner. I don't want to see a bad Big 12 winner. I don't want to see a group of five conference winner just cause. I want to see the best teams. I don't care. Like, yes, I want you to win your conference, but if you're winning your conference at, say, 9-3, okay, I officially just don't care anymore. I like, say Oregon beats Utah in the conference championship, like close. I wouldn't put them in the playoff if it was 6 or 8 teams, because you saw what they looked like against Utah in that first game. You saw what they looked like against Stanford, against Cal. Like, yes, they had that one great win against Ohio State. That was early in the season. I care about the current product. The current product is, I mean, lack for better words, awful. They just got physically dominated in all facets of the game. That's all I would say. No conference auto bids. That's all I want. SEC is obviously going to get in. Big Ten is going to get in. ACC most years is going to get in. Don't force it. Just give me the best teams.
All right, let's go ahead and let's just get to the whole opt-out situation. I think that'll officially close us out. I'll go ahead and I'll just get on my take real quick. I think with Kenny Pickett situations, and I already said it with Nick Patty, and you saw Pittsburgh's team essentially get decimated during the entire Peach Bowl. That's why players opt out. That's it. I mean, Kenny Pickett was already essentially a guaranteed QB1 going into this draft. I still think he's going to be QB1. He's going to be QB1. That's most mocks that I've seen.
I think he will. It's not guaranteed yet, though.
Well, main point is he solidified himself as a top 10 pick. He's going to get that top 10 pick money. Why risk it? I think whenever you look at Jalen Smith in that 2016 Fiesta Bowl against Ohio State, that is why players opt out.
I completely agree. I do think Kenny Pickett made the completely right decision. The only bowl games I wouldn't opt out of are for the college football playoff. If I can win a national championship, I'm going to do it. If I can't, you know what? Maybe I would think about the Rose Bowl, but every other game, you know what? Let me make my money. I've been with this college for the last 3, 4, 5 years. These guys are my brothers, but sometimes your teammates are gonna realize, as much as I want to play my final collegiate game with you guys in this bowl game, I also have to do something for my family, and that is making a lot of money. A lot of people, they look at the NFL and they view it as almost insurance, because not only is your first contract isn't everything. When you make your money, it's the second contract, but the first contract is getting that next step, and you want to make sure that you are drafted as high as possible, because more money, higher you're drafted. But I don't understand why people are against people opting out. And this is going to go to the whole Kirk Herbstreit clip, which, to my defense, I haven't watched all of it. So I'm just going to go off of my personal take. I'm not going to say anything about Kirk Herbstreit because I haven't seen that yet. I don't think it's about people not loving football. I think it's about people being more business savvy than they were 20, 30 years ago. 20, 30 years ago, there isn't as much money in the NFL as there is today. Today in the NFL, you're making tens of millions of dollars if you're a top 5 pick in your rookie contract. And that's not even including sponsorships. Trevor Lawrence has deals, Zach Wilson has deals, Mac Jones has deals. All these guys are getting deals from major corporations to sponsor their products. That's a lot of money. So you just got to make sure that you are doing the best thing for your career. It's not always about the team, because yes, you play as a team, you've gone through this hard season, you deserve to go one more game to win a bowl game, win a trophy, celebrate with your team. But if that bowl game, and not to, you know, say that bowl games are meaningless, because they are not meaningless. A lot of players spend a lot of time getting to these bowl games. I remember the clip of the South Carolina player who was crying because, they had won the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and it was such a amazing moment. But if there's a bowl game that isn't going to really help your stock, or not going to help your, like, and I say this in air quotes, legacy as a college player, I'm going to go get the for sure thing, which is my contract. Kenny Pickett, if he had played in this game and gotten injured, he would not be the first quarterback taken. If it was a major injury, I should say. Like Matt Corral, a completely different scenario. I don't think he's going to fall that much in stock, because it's just a small ankle sprain from what I've seen. So I don't think that's really going to hurt him that much. It's going to hurt him a little, probably, but that's also just like that minor stuff that teams take into account in this part of the draft process. So kind of recapping, because I know I've gone on a few tangents. Opt-outs aren't a problem for bowl games, but if we do see players opting out earlier in seasons, that's where I view a bit of a problem, because then it's getting to, okay, you're kind of, I don't want to say quitting on your team, but you're kind of just leaving them in the dust for something that you view as guaranteed. But as we know, in not only college football, but in the NFL, nothing is guaranteed right now.
I know I already kind of said my point, and there's one thing I want to add to Andrew's point, Andrew Wilson, what you said about it's a business decision, and I 100% agree with you. I think it's 100% a business decision, which I think there's a lot of players out there, and I'm for opting out. Especially if you're gonna go get, if you're a top 5 pick, go get the bag. Do take care of your body, take care of yourself, do it the right way, like you said. But there's a lot of players that I think are getting bad advice, who are opting out when they could essentially help their draft stock by playing, in my opinion. Because if you have, Chris Olave opting out, right, and then you have, a receiver that's now going to play a lot more in front because Chris Olave opted out, and now that receiver opts out as well. Now they don't have that opportunity, right? So I think that, just because you're a senior, or just because you're a junior who's going to go to the draft, you can definitely help your draft stock by playing in these bowl games, because one, a lot of people are watching these bowl games. Not everybody's watching Marshall play football, but you're going to watch the New Orleans Bowl, and they're going to see Marshall play in the New Orleans Bowl. So if there's a guy who can definitely help his draft stock by playing in a bowl game, you should definitely play in that bowl game. So I think there's a lot of players who are getting bad advice from people, and they are opting out.
Yeah, and I want to touch on this really quickly, because I know we're kind of taking a long time. I loved the example of Chris Olave, because I don't know if it's bad advice, but I do think he should have played in the Rose Bowl. Because for me personally, as someone who's been paying attention to the draft, I don't think he's a guaranteed first-round pick. I don't. I think Garrett Wilson is. I think Jameson Williams is. I think Drake London is, even though he has the injury. I think Treylon Burks is. I don't know if Chris Olave is, because he doesn't really have anything about him that's truly game-breaking compared to the other 4 receivers that I just mentioned. Then you've got the guys that are probably going around too, like a David Bell, a Jahan Dotson. So I just want to say I loved that example. So is there anything else? Actually, let's just everyone say their favorite bowl game really quickly, and then we can kind of wrap this up. Let's start with you, Andrew. Yeah, I'll go next. As much as I loved the Rose Bowl, the Music City Bowl, that was something special. The Purdue Tennessee game, whether you think the forward progress stopped in overtime, that's a completely different debate. But it's just the offense that was in that game. It was so fun to watch. Getting to see 2 programs that were just, Tennessee's offense this year, and Purdue just being the giant slayer that they were. Super fun game. I think it was really underrated. Like we watched it, and then people kind of forgot about it, but no, that was a really fun game. So I think that is gonna wrap it up for us today. Thank you everyone for listening to the Transfer Portal podcast presented by NoContextCFB. Make sure you like and subscribe and do whatever for whatever place you're listening or watching. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe. If you're on Spotify, Apple, add, and make sure to follow Portal CFB on Twitter. College football season may be coming to an end, but the content won't stop. Thank you all for listening or watching, and have a great day.